Imagine an ordinary Soviet industrial city in the 1980s, Pavlograd. Life goes on as usual. Factories, schools, clubs. But in October 1984, the silence explodes. 8-year-old Olya Dmitrienko is found on the abandoned grounds of a factory. The town doesn't yet know that this is the beginning of a bloody marathon that will last 25 years. A few months later, in February 1985, something incredibly audacious happens. 9-year-old Olya Shuvalova is walking home from the clinic in broad daylight. The entrance is just a few steps away. Her mother is waiting for her at home. Looking out the window, seeing footprints in the snow leading straight to the door. But the girl is not in the apartment. She will be found in the basement of her own home, raped and murdered. Portrait of a disembodied spirit. Investigators are shocked. Not a single fingerprint, not a single clue. The criminal works like a ghost. He knows where the cameras are. There were almost none back then. He knows the patrol schedules. He doesn't just kill, he mocks the system. We'll learn why later. He's part of it. But for now, the police are convinced it's one of their own or a local lunatic. The system's first victim. Igor Ryzhkov. Authorities need results. Moscow is pressuring. The city is rebelling. And then the perfect candidate comes into sight. Igor Ryzhkov. A young man, an athlete, an activist. What's his crime? He often visited his former school to visit his mother, a teacher, and sometimes he'd pop into the girls' dorm to see a girl. This is enough for the investigation. Igor is thrown into a press hut, a cell with criminals who work for the administration. He's physically and mentally broken. They promise him, sign a confession to a couple of counts. We'll fine you 50 rubles. And then we'll let you go. A desperate young man, not realizing he was signing his own death warrant, signs it. Result, trial, capital punishment, execution by firing squad. Igor stands in the courtroom and whispers, "I swear I didn't do it." He was saved only by a miracle and a bureaucratic delay, which resulted in the execution being postponed and later commuted. While Igor sat on death row, the true maniac continued to hunt. VANGA. And the impotence of the police, it reaches the point of absurdity. The Soviet police, a bastion of atheism and logic, admit their impotence. A group of investigators secretly travel to Bulgaria to see Vanga. But the seer is mistaken, giving vague clues. Then they turn to Moscow psychics. They point to the railroad and indeed, Sveti Mezovich's body is found there. But does this help catch the killer? No. The killer reads the newspapers and laughs. Vladimir Svetlikny. When those closest betray. 1987. Pavlograd had become a ghost town. After a series of murders, the body of 9-year-old Olya Svetliknaya was found in a forest belt. She had simply gone out on her bike to buy bread and never returned. Her father, Vladimir, found his daughter's body 300 meters from their home. Instead of sympathy, he received handcuffs. The investigator's logic was monstrous. He knew where the body was, so he hid it himself. But the most terrifying thing was the methods they used against his wife, Lyudmila. Investigators spent hours hammering into the grief-stricken mother. Your husband is a beast. He strangled your daughter while you were waiting for her with lunch, under enormous pressure. Lyudmila believed them. She testified against her husband. Vladimir Svetlikny was left alone against the world, unable to bear the shame, betrayal, and accusation of the most heinous sin. He committed suicide right in his pretrial detention cell. After his death, the investigators reported with relief, the maniac has been found and punished, and indeed, the murders in Pavla had ceased, not because Svetlikny was guilty, but because the true beast had decided to change his hunting grounds. Polo High. new life and a model citizen. While cases were being closed in Pavlograd, Sergey Tkach celebrated his victory. He felt like a genius who had outsmarted the system. At this time, he moved to the regional center of Poloi in the Zaporizhia region. There, he started life anew. Tkach married, had children, and found work at a pumping station. The neighbors couldn't be happier with Uncle Syriza, a former policeman, polite, teetotal. He was always ready to help with a faucet or a fence. Tkach became so immersed in his role that neighbors often left their children with him to look after. The children loved him. He treated them to candy. No one knew that this kind grandfather had already targeted their daughters for his next victims. It was his ultimate feat living among the people he planned to destroy. Yasha Popovich, stolen youth in Poloi. Tkach began killing again, but became even more cautious. Years could pass between crimes, and each time, the system continued to find convenient culprits. The most high-profile tragedy was the case of Yasha Popovich. In 2002, his 9-year-old cousin disappeared. 14-year-old Yasha found her himself in the reeds by the river. And once again, the old slogan worked: found, then killed. The boy was arrested right in the middle of a school lesson. The 7th grader was tortured, just like the adults. He was forced to confess to his sister's murder. Yasha received 15 years in prison. When Tkach was caught years later, Yasha would be released, but it would no longer be a boy who would emerge from prison, but a deeply ill, disabled person with a severe form of tuberculosis. His youth was spent in the camps for a crime committed by his neighbor, who was peacefully sipping tea at the time. The psychology of the cleaner. Why didn't Tkach stop? During interrogations, he would call it a test for lice. He despised his former colleagues. Every time another innocent person was imprisoned for his murder, whether it was Vitaly Kara, Yasha Popovich, or Vladimir Svetlikny, who had been brought to the gallows, Tkach would give himself a mentor. He considered himself a forest ranger, purging the world of the weak and simultaneously proving the complete incompetence of law enforcement. He didn't just kill children. He reveled in the way the system devoured itself, destroying the lives of honest people. A look at Sergey Tkach's life story reveals a true military strategist. He was born in the Kemerovo region, Siberia, where he began his police service. But as soon as the ground beneath his feet began to crumble, he moved to a new region, Crimea, Simferopol. First murder in 1980. Tkach realized that, as a forensic investigator, he was head and shoulders above the local detectives. Dnipropetrovsk region, Pavlograd, the bloodiest period. Here, he perfected his invisibility tactics. When others began to be imprisoned and executed for his crimes, he realized the system was covering for him. Zaporizhia region, Poloi, the final point. Here, he settled down, built a house, and became one of the gang. Tkach moved precisely at the moments when the murder spree reached critical mass, and investigations from Moscow or Kiev were converging on the city. He left not because he was afraid, but because the game in this place was boring. A cozy little house on the outskirts of Polog. Sergey Tkach, neat and tidy in a clean shirt, is pottering in the garden. He's just returned from work at the pumping station, where he's valued as a disciplined employee. He sits down to dinner with his family, stroking his children's heads. He's a respected labor veteran, a cramped, stuffy pretrial detention cell. 14-year-old Yasha Popovich is held there. His teeth are missing, and he's coughing up blood from progressive tuberculosis. His life is over before it has even begun. His mother has been knocking on the doors of authorities, but they laugh in her face. Your son is a degenerate, a maniac. The most terrifying thing is that Tkach knew about these people. He read the local newspapers, which reported on the arrest of yet another killer. In later interviews, he recalled with a cynical grin, "I read the news and was amazed. What idiots work in the law enforcement agencies. They themselves give me freedom by putting all sorts of petty crimes behind bars for me." Tkach didn't just kill, he collected mistakes. He had a phenomenal memory. He remembered every one of his victims, but he remembered even better those who had been imprisoned in his place. For him, this was proof of his intellectual superiority. He used his forensic knowledge not to escape. He was already above suspicion, but to frame others. He left bodies where they were sure to be found by someone close to the victim or a suspicious local resident. He literally led the investigation onto a false trail, playing with people's destinies like chess pieces. August 2005. Sergey Tkach had become so confident in his impunity that he had stopped being cautious. His last victim was 9-year-old Kotia Kaji, his neighbor's daughter. Tkach committed the murder on the bank of a local river, where the girl was sunbathing with her friends. But this time, he miscalculated. Kotia's friends saw Uncle Sergey approach her and beckon her to follow him. After the murder, Tkach behaved with extreme cynicality. He attended the girl's funeral, offered his condolences to her father, stood by the coffin, and even helped dig the grave. While he stood in the cemetery, the children who had seen him by the river whispered. They told their parents, who told the police. This time, the system that had spent 25 years imprisoning innocent people couldn't ignore direct evidence. On August 5, 2005, detectives knocked on Tkach's door. He didn't resist. His first words were, "I've been waiting for you for 25 years." This wasn't repentance, it was the proud declaration of a master who had finally decided to lay his cards on the table. A search of his home, a museum of horror. Children's notebooks, hairpins, dolls, lipsticks, hundreds of items he'd taken from his victims as trophies. During his very first interrogation, he began dictating a list: 20, 40, 80, 100 victims. Investigators who had been reporting successful solutions for years sat there pale-faced. Tkach described in detail every crime for which others had already served time or died in prison. In court, Tkach acted like a rock star. He never lowered his gaze, reveling in the flashes of the cameras. Psychiatrists confirmed he suffered from Harastrata syndrome, a morbid desire to make history at any cost. He constantly changed the number of victims, sometimes increasing it to 120, sometimes decreasing it, to torment investigators. He demanded that his case be recognized as the largest in history, dreaming of eclipsing Chikatilo. But the most horrific result of the trial was the fact that, due to his professionalism and the laziness of the system, 9 innocent people were convicted of his sins. In court, Tkach acted like a rock star. He never lowered his gaze, reveling in the flashes of the cameras. Psychiatrists confirmed he suffered from Harastrata syndrome, a morbid desire to make history at any cost. He constantly changed the number of victims, sometimes increasing it to 120, sometimes decreasing it, to torment investigators. He demanded that his case be recognized as the largest in history, hoping to eclipse Chikatilo. But the most horrific result of the trial was the fact that, due to his professionalism and the laziness of the system, 9 innocent people were convicted of his sins. Even in a penal colony for life-sentence prisoners, Tkach managed to create a media sensation. A young woman from Yaroslavl, Elena, saw a report about him on television and fell in love with the maniac. She began writing him letters, and in 2016, she came to the colony and married him. They even had a daughter. Tkach boasted to journalists that he was the happiest man on earth. This episode provokes particular fury among the relatives of the deceased girls, the maniac, who deprived their children of a future, himself and the right to personal happiness and procreation in prison. Sergey Tkach planned to live a long life. He hoped for a pardon after 25 years in prison and dreamed of earning millions in royalties for his memoir, The Weaver of Death. He believed Hollywood would make a movie about him, like Hannibal Lecter, but fate decreed otherwise. In 2018, at the age of 66, the Pelogymaniac died of a heart attack in a prison hospital. He took with him a precise number of victims, leaving behind only mountains of criminal records and the shattered lives of dozens of families. The story of Sergey Tkach is not only a tale of a monster in human form, it is a story about the dangers of the system's indifference and formalism. While some received eponymous honors for quick solutions, others rotted in prison, and the true beast continued to hunt. Let this story be a reminder that the price of a miscarriage of justice is always someone's life. What do you think of this story? Could Tkach have operated for so long without the protection of the authorities? Comment below, like, and subscribe to stay up to date on new investigations.